Okay, sit down. I'll just, so many interesting points. I'll jump up here. Let me first ask you and Anders and Monika can answer and chip in. Anastasia, the censorship we see in Russia now, is it a sign that Putin is weaker than he was, or is it a sign that he's stronger?
I don't know how to answer because I don't know what the weakness is.
No.
I personally believe that Putin has some mental illnesses, probably. And yeah, I really believe it, because it used to be like, common complaining about, our government,
right.
Our president is mad. It happens everywhere. But finally, then he wrote those articles a year and a half ago about Ukraine, and I just saw some parts of the articles because I wasn't strong enough to read the whole one. And at this very moment, I understand that something goes wrong.
Right.
So he's not a rational guy. He's not rational, yeah, and
right.
That is the problem. So he really believes what he is doing.
Right, and your point was very interestingly that a lot of Russians also believe that it's true, but of course if they are informed or subjected to other versions or the reality that consensus at some point will crumble. Do you think what can we do to make this happen? I mean, is it a good thing that we ban Russian propaganda on Western platforms, or would it be better if we didn't, so we could see what is actually happening? How can we break through this propaganda?
I don't like Russian propaganda, and I think it's influenced not only Russian people, of course. And for example, the trick with our government is that they create the propaganda for common people to make them believe what the government wants them to believe. And finally, the government itself believed its own propaganda. And it's kind of impossible thing, but it is. We can see that many, of course, there are some rational people still there, but most of our government, we just see that they really believe what they're telling, and because it's a pleasant way to believe that everything is good, we are winning, that we are good guys, not the bad one, and no one is suffering, no one is dying. It's just no one knows what happens. So, but it's something good, glorious things are going on, and that's it.
Monika, Instagram and Facebook is forbidden in Russia. I'm sure a lot of parents here would think, how do they do that? Interesting. No, but what, in your experience, when this happens, what can Western-based technology platforms do to break through the censorship in a country like Russia?
Well, it's one of the challenges is it is often hard to break through, and we are banned there. But I would say some of the challenges around speech on that topic aren't just confined to the Russian limitations. We've seen a number of government takedown requests outside of Russia that have been focused on Russian narratives, Russian propaganda, and there's a lot that we do to ensure that people can recognize propaganda for what it is. If an account is false, if somebody is pretending to be, let's say you have a Russian account holder who's running political ads trying to pretend they're American or Danish or something like that, if we can identify that an account is misrepresenting who it is, it would come down. We have unprecedented levels of transparency that we require in political ads. And we label content from state media. And then, of course, we work with the fact checkers I mentioned earlier to label and reduce the visibility of misinformation. But when you get government requests to remove content, interestingly, some of those requests that we got were around Russian propaganda. Some of them were focused on speech against democratic governments based on issues stemming from the war in Ukraine.
Right.
So there's a stifling of speech in Russia by restricting access to these apps, but it actually goes much broader than that. And the stifling of speech happens in countries in democratic Europe as well.
That leads me to the question both you and Jakob was talking about this, the precedent issue, that the stifling of, or the laws against, measures against freedom of speech on especially tech platforms in Western democratic countries in a way is used as an argument in authoritarian regimes. Is that really so? Do we know that it works like that? I know this is what they're saying, but wouldn't they anyhow do whatever they would do in order to stifle freedom of expression in Iran, China, Russia?
Of course they would. So censorship is part of the DNA of authoritarian regimes. So sure they would. But it gives them legitimacy. So for instance, when the European Union adopted a regulation banning state-sponsored Russian propaganda, and even to the extent that enforcement requires within the European Union social media platforms to remove content from such platforms, the spokesperson for the Kremlin, Peskov, is he called Denis Peskov, said that, oh, look at the Europeans, they're selling out their own values, we will certainly retaliate, and so can use that to justify it. And it also just makes it much more difficult to have the bright lines that you want between free speech standards in democracies and authoritarian states if it becomes a question of saying, yes, we have these laws against propaganda, but our understanding of propaganda is right and you're wrong. In other words, because we're an open democracy, we have the right to censor, but because you're an authoritarian, you shouldn't be censoring. I mean, right. that to me is a completely incoherent argument. So you have to suffer that. And I also think that it really shows a weakness on the parts of democracies. Do we really believe, for instance, in Denmark, that Danes, if we believe that Danes are going to be so affected by Russian propaganda that a critical mass of the Danish population is going to be Putin fans, then, we might as well close this building, because then, we vote on the basis of access to information on political ideas. If you can't trust the ordinary citizen in a free and open democracy to be able, or a critical mass of them, to be able to sift through propaganda, then the whole basis of democracy really comes tumbling down. And I think, I think it's been great for me. I follow Julia Davis, who runs the Russian Media Monitor. She translates these clips on YouTube of the insane Russian propaganda, everything from calls to genocide to blatant lies. I think it gives a great window into what's going on at levels of Russian. And we want to know that, I think, in the West and all around the world, to see the crazy ideas that are being circulated. And ironically, some of these videos on YouTube have been removed, and they've been removed due to pressure from the EU.
Let's just hear what Monika. Sorry, Anastasia thinks of this, and also Monika afterwards. We should be able to watch Putin's propaganda in order to understand what's going on. It's better for us. It educates us in a way. What do you think?
Anyway, it's not as easy to prohibit information. Putin government tries to, but they still haven't succeeded. So I think the point is to pay attention to the propaganda. And because, for example, I I didn't take it seriously in 2014. I saw, I'm not really a TV fan, so I don't see it, and I saw some news programs those days, and I saw, oh, it's terrible, it's kind of a weird things, and I thought it's something about, people, there are some movies for people who believe in UFO, for example, and they have their audience, and it was something like that. No sense, no rational there. It's just, I don't know. Every people, every person on Maidan are drug addict, for example. And it's like, oh, look at them, they use drugs. Come on, it's what is it? It's just common people on the square. And I saw it with my own eyes, of course, and it's unbelievable. How can people believe some weird things, really weird? And so I didn't take it seriously, but it was a mistake, my mistake, for example. And many people made the same mistake. Then they just think, okay, Russian propaganda, they took something that obviously cannot be truth. And every people will understand that it's not the truth, probably some that are not very clear.
But do you think Russian state propaganda should be banned on Western platforms?
I don't think it should be banned, but if you have Russian propaganda, you should argue with it.
Right.
You should make another point of view,
right.
and not just, okay, let it be, and and people will understand where is the truth. They won't, probably, if they see that.
Monika?
Yes, and I agree. We want a lot of transparency. I mean, the measures that we have in place are designed to make sure that people know who's actually doing the speaking. But again, and this is sort of what I was referring to in my remarks earlier, if you say, well, it's okay to restrict Russian propaganda beyond just labeling it, but we want to make sure we're removing any Russian propaganda. Let's say that that's your policy. The accuracy challenges there and the precedents that you set, that means that you're going to be removing content that is, and that we saw government takedown requests that were that were to remove speech made by citizens outside of Russia, European citizens outside of Russia, that were criticizing European governments outside of Russia. And we saw those takedown requests marked as being related to the war in Russia. So
how do you respond to that?
we push back on a request to remove content where it is political speech, and we do that both by pushing back legally by saying we don't think that this speech is actually unlawful in your country, and so we want further justification, and sometimes countries will actually withdraw the request. Right. But I will say the other thing, when we have, you asked, are we really creating precedents when the democratic regimes really create precedents for authoritarian regimes, or would they do it anyway? Maybe they would, but there's a lot that's beyond the substance. There's a lot that's process focused when you're talking about government censorship requests to tech companies. For instance, the difference between here's a court order saying that this speech is illegal in whatever democracy, please remove it, is different than you need to use your tools to do an automated scan through your site for this content, or you need to store data locally so that we can ensure that you will remove this content, or we will impose criminal liability on the directors of your company if you fail to remove something as illegal. That sort of provision, when it is imported into an authoritarian regime, I mean, it should give us pause anyway, but when it's imported into an authoritarian regime, it's especially scary for expression.
Right. And in your view, how much of this is going on right now? The backlash from Western restrictions.
I think it's difficult to quantify, but I think there is a marked difference in how democracies talk about free speech compared to earlier times, the golden age that I mentioned, right. And I think that shows that the culture of free speech is in erosion, both among democracies, but also I think a lot of citizens probably also have become more skeptical, just because extreme speech is amplified. But also, I think very often, you mentioned this, Monika, that's a good example. So when the whole Russian disinformation was running in the US in 2018, and Mark Zuckerberg was dragged before Congress, the New York Times ran this front page about a Russian-sponsored ad about Hillary Clinton being compared to Satan. And it was sort of seen, this is something that would have influenced the election. It was something like 14 persons in the US that had actually clicked on it and viewed it. So there's this amplification of the potential harms. Right. Like there are harms, but we need to keep some kind of perspective. And I think we have a tendency as human beings to focus narrowly and obsessively on the dark sides and take the benefits for granted.
Let me just take this and put it into the last question and then a coffee break. Monika, I mean, if you just put it very bluntly, there are two camps. One thing that you are going too far in content moderation, and the other camp saying you're not doing enough. Where is Meta? Where would you be yourself right now?
Look, when I spoke about the lines being imperfect, there are times when I get reports every day from my team on the kind of content that they are seeing come up through the content review channels. And every day there are instances where we say, oh gosh, this was something that was removed that shouldn't have been, or this is something that wasn't removed that should have been. So none of these lines are perfect. The enforcement is not perfect. I think what we can do is try to shed transparency on it. Like Jacob said, sometimes there's just people don't understand how small the prevalence of the bad content is. There's a tendency to really sort of latch onto and exaggerate that. One thing that we've tried to do is create external measures for accountability. So not only do we publish those numbers, but we also have the oversight board. And there's actually a member of the oversight board who's speaking later today. If you've tracked those opinions, they have, and she of course can speak to them, but they have mostly, to the extent that they have overruled Facebook's decisions, Meta's decisions, they've been on the side of you need to restore this content, put more content up. Look, I can say it's a thoughtful process that we go through to draw these lines. We talk to experts all over the world, but at the margins, these will continue to be tricky calls. I think by having groups like the Oversight Board and by publishing the numbers that we publish, we can hopefully inform, the public debate on this. Those are the same people that we engage with as we continue to refine those lines.
Okay. We're out of time. Guys, thanks so much for your presentations and your remarks. Give all the three of them a big hand. Thank you very much. Thanks.